Marcus Greyson navigated the labyrinth of stalls that cluttered the alleyways of Los Angeles' oldest street market, his keen eyes scanning over trinkets and relics with the practiced ease of a seasoned art historian. The market was a vibrant tapestry of cultures, a place where the sense of exotic spices mingled with the smoky aroma of grilled meats, where vendors shouted in a dozen languages, and the air hummed with barter and banter. Yet, despite the kaleidoscope of activity, Marcus felt adrift. His recent work had left him disillusioned. Museum politics and endless lectures had sapped his passion. He longed for something authentic, something that could rekindle the fire that had once driven him to explore the world's forgotten corners. The sun sank low, casting elongated shadows that mingled with strings of dim lanterns, bestowing an otherworldly glow upon the market. Amidst the cacophony, a faint whisper seemed to call his name, an ephemeral sound that cut through the noise and settled into his bones. Drawn by an inexplicable urge, he found himself turning down a narrow alleyway, where a weathered vendor sat behind an array of peculiar artifacts. The man's eyes were like dark pools, reflecting secrets untold. "Looking for something special?" the vendor asked, his voice barely above a whisper yet resonant with ancient echoes. Marcus's gaze fixed upon a small statuette nestled among tarnished jewelry and faded textiles. Carved from obsidian, it depicted a deity with a jaguar's snarling visage and serpentine body, adorned with intricate glyphs that seemed to dance under the flickering light of a nearby lantern. The eyes, inlaid with jade, gleamed unnaturally, capturing the ambient light in a way that defied explanation. An inexplicable chill ran down Marcus's spine, a mixture of awe and apprehension. He felt as though the figure was scrutinizing him, probing the depths of his soul. "Ah, Tezcatlipoca," the vendor murmured, noticing his interest. "A guardian and a trickster. He appears to those seeking truth, but be wary. His gifts come at a price." Marcus hesitated, his rational mind fighting against a growing compulsion. "How much?" he found himself asking. The vendor smiled enigmatically. "For you, a mere trifle. But remember, some doors, once opened, are not easily closed." Without fully understanding why, Marcus purchased the statuette, cradling it carefully as he made his way home through the gathering dusk, oblivious to the vendor's gaze following him until he vanished from sight. That night, sleep eluded him. His usually comforting apartment felt oppressive, shadows stretching across the walls in unnatural shapes. The ticking of the clock seemed louder, each second hammering into his consciousness. He placed the statuette on his desk, intending to examine it further, but found himself drawn to its jade eyes, which now seemed to glow with an inner light. As fatigue overcame him, he slumped into his chair, only to be plunged into vivid nightmares the moment his eyes closed. Visions flooded his mind, towering pyramids bathed in blood-red light under a lunar eclipse, priests in elaborate headdresses performing rituals that churned his stomach, chants in a forgotten tongue echoing through the dense jungle. He stood among them, both participant and observer, feeling the cold sting of an obsidian blade against his skin. He awoke with a start, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. The room was silent, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. He glanced at the statuette. It had moved, now facing directly toward him, though he was certain he had left it angled away. Over the following days, the boundary between reality and hallucination blurred. Familiar streets became labyrinthine corridors, facades of buildings shifting subtly when he wasn't looking. Reflections in shop windows showed not his own visage, but that of a masked figure adorned with feathers and gold, eyes replaced by swirling stars. Marcus became increasingly isolated, his colleagues noting his distracted demeanor and pallid complexion. Desperate to make sense of his unraveling sanity, he reached out to Dr. Elena Vargas, an archaeologist known for her expertise in Mesoamerican cultures and her unconventional methods. Meeting in a quiet cafe, he recounted his experiences, the words tumbling out in a frantic stream. Elena listened intently, her sharp eyes betraying a mix of concern and intrigue. At the mention of Tezcatlipoca, she paled slightly. "You're playing with forces that shouldn't be trifled with," she warned. "Tezcatlipoca is not just any deity. He's the embodiment of change through conflict, a harbinger of chaos. You must return the statuette, or better yet, destroy it." Marcus clenched his jaw, torn between fear and an inexplicable attachment to the object. "I can't," he whispered. "It's as if it's a part of me now." Ignoring her warnings, driven by a compulsion that gnawed at his very being, Marcus delved deeper into the lore surrounding the deity. His apartment became a shrine to Tezcatlipoca, books and scrolls strewn across every surface, walls adorned with sketches of symbols he'd seen in his visions. Sleep was a distant memory. Reality slipped further away with each passing hour. One evening, as a thick fog clawed its way through the city streets, he felt an irresistible urge to climb to the highest point he could reach. He found himself atop the Griffith Observatory, the city sprawled below like a glittering web. Clutching the statuette, he raised it skyward. The air grew heavy, electric, the scent of ozone mingling with something earthier, ancient. A low rumble reverberated through the ground, and the sky began to fracture, spiderweb cracks revealing a swirling void beyond. From the abyss, a colossal figure emerged, Tezcatlipoca incarnate, his form shifting between man and beast, eyes as dark and infinite as the cosmos, reflecting the terror that now consumed Marcus's soul. A chorus of whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, words in an arcane language compelling him to surrender completely. Just as the darkness threatened to engulf him, a sudden warmth pierced the cold void surrounding him. A firm hand grasped his shoulder, and he turned to see Dr. Vargas standing beside him, her eyes reflecting steadfast determination. "I couldn't let you face this alone," she shouted over the maelstrom. She began to chant, her voice steady and melodic, weaving words from a dialect long forgotten by time. Each syllable resonated, pushing back the encroaching shadows. Symbols etched themselves into the air, forming a luminous barrier between them and the god. The statuette in Marcus's hand grew hot, searing his flesh, but he couldn't release it. Elena placed her hands over his, channeling her energy. The statuette trembled violently before shattering into 1,000 pieces, each fragment dissolving into light. Tezcatlipoca let out a thunderous roar, his form unraveling as he was pulled back into the void. The sky sealed itself with a blinding flash, and silence descended, broken only by the distant hum of the city's oblivious inhabitants resuming their lives. In the aftermath, Marcus found himself alone atop the observatory, the cool night air settling around him like a shroud. The city lights below twinkled innocently, as if nothing had transpired. There was no sign of Dr. Vargas or any evidence of the cosmic battle that had just unfolded. His hands were unmarked, the pain from the statuette's heat now a fading memory. Confusion and relief warred within him, but a lingering sense of unease remained. His phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Vargas. "We need to talk. Urgent. Meet me at the old museum archive." Grasping at this lifeline, he hurried to the location only to find the building dark and abandoned. Inside, dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight, settling over forgotten artifacts and empty shelves. On a table lay a single file folder bearing Elena's name. Opening it, his blood ran cold. Inside were missing person reports, newspaper clippings detailing her disappearance years ago during an expedition to the ruins of Teotihuacan. A photograph showed her standing beside the very statuette he had purchased. The room grew colder, and from the shadows a familiar whisper emerged. "The mirror shows all, Marcus. The journey has only begun." He spun around to face the darkness, but there was nothing. Only the faint reflection of himself in the dusty glass, and deep within his eyes the glint of jade.